Today is a special online lecture that is fed through the YouTube. And the title of my presentation today is The Secrets to Long Life, Health and Happiness, Psychological, Neurobiological, and Cultural Analysis. So when I give this lecture, I first ask this question: do you want to live long? Do you want to have a long life? And throughout human history, people wanted to live long, and this is one of the key to human aspiration. Yes, so most people want to live long, but the question is, what happens if you get cancer? You have to get chemotherapy. What happens if you get diabetes or heart attack? Would you want to live long? So living long is not the answer or end all. We want to be healthy. So how can you be healthy? And let's say you're healthy. Physically, you're vital. You have very good heart. You have very good, yes. So that, yes, you have a very good life. But what if you're alone? You're depressed and you have no one to talk to. You'll be miserable. So the third thing is you want to be happy. And so these are three key. And why am I wearing this? Okay. And why am I talking with a mic? And the reason is, this is one of the secrets. It's very simple, wearing a mask, because we're living in the time of coronavirus. The worst thing that can happen is that you get infected, and you'll have breathing problems, and you'll have heart problems, and you will get what we call brain disease. What is worse than getting a coronavirus is infecting people that you love, your family members, your friends. So why are we refusing to wear a mask? Because it is a very simple solution, and it can reduce the infection of coronavirus up to 60 to 70%. So in Europe, we're experiencing a second wave. In the United States, there are more than 50,000 people who are infected every day. So if you think about it, Korea has about 25,000 infections for the last 9 months, which is half of the infections in the United States and 1/4 that of Europe. And one of the reasons is very simple: wearing a mask, social distancing, and contact tracing that is based on modern technology. So in order to live long, you want to be healthy and you want to be happy. And what is the secret? Just one word, one key: creativity. We have to be creative. And mask, although it is very rudimentary, it is an effective tool to make sure that we don't get infected by coronavirus, because it will destroy your life. It will destroy your health. And you have to get treatment. And we don't know how long the symptom will last. So why is creativity so important to our psychology, to our brain functioning, and happiness? Why? Because we have evolved for thousands of years. And there are 4 aspects that we have to consider. One, as I said, our physiology. Coronavirus is a very primitive life form. It's not even a life form. It's called an RNA. It can only exist if it has a host, such as a bat or a human being. So our body is very important. And if our bodies do not function fully, it is very difficult to be happy. Second, even though you're healthy physically, how about your mind? Do you have rationality? Can you make clear decisions? So mind is an important part of our health. And the third part is our health. Do you have good relationship? Do you have positive outlook in life? And can you be happy? And the third part that is least studied is the spiritual aspect. What you believe, what is important to you, what you value. So these are the 4 keys to health, long life, and happiness. And they are all created, because our body is created. We're not born with our body, but we have changed the body. And what is creativity? It's bringing something that is physical into life. So what is a color? Color is a reflection of the light. So we can use these paints or pens, and we paint on an empty canvas. And we use an empty canvas, the colors that is available, to create this, Mona Lisa, probably the most famous painting in the world. And the question is, why is she famous? Do you know who she is? Most people do not know who she is. She's famous because of her smile. It's called Mona Lisa's smile. So is she smiling because she's happy or because she's sad? And she's famous because of her eyes. I can look into Mona Lisa and she looks into me. And it's a symbol of what we call Renaissance, where human occupied the center and nature behind. And so with an empty canvas, with the paint that is physical, we can create something that is alive, that we can feel and we can interact. So where do we come from in terms of physiology, biology? We belong to the ape family. So bonobo monkey is our sister, chimpanzee is our brother. Our second cousin is gorilla. Then our third cousin is orangutan, then holobats. Did you know that we share 99% of the genes with chimpanzees and bonobo monkeys? Physiologically, genetically, we're not that different from monkeys. And when someone calls you a monkey or someone calls me a monkey, I said, yes, I'm a monkey. We have evolved from the ape family. We share 99% of the gene. But the reason we behave differently is because we have creativity. We took something that is useless in a river or an ocean. It's called a rock. So rock is useless unless you convert it into a tool. And this is the basis of creativity and innovation. Because human beings were weak physically and we wanted to hunt and fish, we used a rock that is not useful and made it meaningful and made it useful. And this is what we call the Stone Age. So we were able to use the natural resources of a stone to create tools that would allow us to hunt. And what is the most powerful natural resource in the world? It's called a fire. And fire is very destructive. And if there is a forest fire, all animals would flee. So are you afraid of fire? Are you afraid of light? Why are you not afraid of fire? If you're afraid of fire, you would not be able to cook. But we are able to cook because we know fire can be very destructive, but it can be controlled. Fire exists when there's wood, and we can extinguish it with water. And human beings are the only animals that can use fire to control it. So it can help us to cook food. It can provide us with light at night, and it can keep us warm, even in the coldest weather. So through our creativity, we were able to control our basic fear of fire. So creativity is overcoming our biological fear, our biological constraint. And by using fire, what do? Potatoes, you cannot raw. But if you fry it, then it's not only tasty, but it provides us with a lot of calories. Meat, it takes 5 hours to chew and digest. And so it's very hard to get the calories from raw meat. So chimpanzees also hunt and eat meat, but they can get more calories from eating fruit. And so they're not interested in hunting as much. But human beings were able to cook meat over the fire. And what does it do? First, it kills all the bacteria. Secondly, it makes it digestible. So it only takes 1 hour to digest cooked meat. And it allows us to consume more calories. Because 80,000 years ago, whether you survived or you died depended on the calories that you consume. So cooking food over the fire allowed us to eat more food that were not edible. And allowed us to consume more calorie. So what is the consequence of getting more calorie? Why? Because the brain uses 5 to 16 times more calorie than your muscle cell. So if you want to lose weight, people exercise. They go to the gym, you run. But do you know the most effective way to lose weight? Use your brain. Because each brain cell burns 5 times more calorie than your muscle cell. So if you concentrate on a project, and if you are studying intensely, after 2 hours, you're hungry. And you will ask yourself, why am I hungry? I didn't do anything. You burnt a lot of calorie. Even if you rest and close your eyes, your brain burns 20% of the energy your body needs. And so brain needs a lot of calorie. And with additional calorie from cooking food, our brain became bigger. And because we cook food over the fire, our jaw muscle became smaller because you don't have to chew the nuts and meat. And our jaw muscles became smaller, which allowed us, our skull, to expand. And as a result of cooking food over the fire, human brain is 4 to 5 times bigger than chimpanzee. Look at the photo of a chimpanzee. Look at the photo of a human being. It's 4 times larger. But the main difference is the frontal lobe. Human beings have a protruding frontal lobe. And this is what we call the executive functioning. This is where rationality is. This is what makes us creative. This is how we can discover, analyze, and communicate. And also, this is where we have empathy, where we can relate to one another, where we can care for one another. So human beings, if you have a relative who is sick, we take care of them. We share food with them. And that allowed us to cooperate, and we were able to survive because we took care of one another, because we have this empathy center based on the frontal lobe. And as you can see, the other animals, the other apes have smaller brain. So why do we have a larger brain? So is Darwin correct? Is it evolution? And for human beings, Darwinian theory is wrong, because human beings did not adapt and evolve. We innovated, we created. And because we were able to overcome our basic instinct to fight, to be dominant, to be aggressive like chimpanzee, but to cooperate, to help one another, to empathize, that helped us to survive. And as a result of having a bigger brain, we can engage in more intellectual. We can engage in scientific activities. So, what is the most important part of our body? Is it your heart? Is it your lung? Is it your stomach? Or is it your brain? Of course, it is our brain. Our brain controls our body. It controls the way we think, and it controls the way we feel. But the question is, do you know how to use your brain? We know how to use our fingers to type, to use our smartphone, to drive. We know how to use our legs to walk, to run, to compete in soccer, to baseball. Do you know how to use your brain? And most people don't know how to use your brain. Do you know how to use your brain so that you can be creative, so that you can be healthy and happy? The question is important, but we don't get any education. There is no course on how to use your brain. And this is a new area of research where we are learning about the brain. We know more about the space, we know more about the deep ocean than our brain, which is part of us and which makes us who we are. Yes, our genes are important, but we cannot control our genes. And we don't know how our genes work. But we can discover how our brain works. So what is a brain? Professor Gerhard Hutter at University of Göttingen said something very interesting. When we think of the brain, we think of neurons. We think of physiology. And he claims, and he concluded, brain is actually a social construction. It is social. and not purely biological. Because human beings can unfold their potential in a supportive community where individuals engage and inspire and contribute to the group. So we are born with potential, not ability. And depending on what we experience with people around us, if they're supportive, if they're caring, and if they're sharing, we develop creativity. If they're abusive, violent, and we become violent and sadomasochistic. So it's not the brain that influences our behavior, but what we experience. Do we experience love, empathy, caring? And in that environment, we're able to develop creativity. And so it is important to understand how the brain works and the misconceptions. So when I went to University at Toronto, I learned about the brain. So are you a right-brained or left-brained? Okay? So left brain is thought to be analytical, detailed, language-oriented. Right brain is supposed to be intuitive, holistic. However, what is important is there's a corpus callosum connecting the left brain to the right brain. So we put an electrode in our brain, and if you stimulate with electricity and if you begin to speak, that part is responsible for speech. If you stimulate another area and our arm moves, that is responsible for movement of the arms. So people believed in IQ, intelligence. People believe in personality, and they thought it was linked to the brain. And we're discovering this is not correct. Why? Because we have over 100 brain cells called neurons that are connected in 100 trillion connection. So we are born with the neurons, but once we're born, it gets connected each and every day, that the child will learn how to move the arm, okay? Or learn how to chew or talk. And it is what people experience every day, different connections are made. And the most important part of the brain, the cerebral cortex, helps to regulate our body, but there are two aspects that are very important. The frontal lobe that makes the decisions, that's the executive branch. But the most important is the limbic system in the core. This is the most primitive. This is the basic. And it's the basis of emotion and it's basis of memory. And all the information from our senses, from our eyes, nose, mouth, pass through the limbic system. And the limbic system is at the center, and this is the frontal lobe. And it is a direct connection. So human beings experience the world through the limbic system. We have a memory and we have emotion. And this is how we make decisions. So the traditional view is that each neuron is separated and it functions on its own, but we're discovering that it is dynamic. And depending on your experience, it gets connected. And only about 10% of the brain is actually connected because our experience is limited. The reason I can speak English is because I grew up in Canada and I can speak a little bit of French. Most Koreans is very difficult. If you live in Switzerland, you can speak 5 languages. So if you live in that environment, different parts of the brain get connected. And the more connections you have, more flexible and more creative you can become. So this is how learning takes place. At step 1, all the neurons are separate. But as you begin to experience, such as eating, walking, talking, communicating, the parts that is stimulated, that is connected. For example, speaking English, if you are an American, or speaking Korean, if you're Korean, becomes very strong. And when the connection becomes strong, it's a superhighway. It processes information very quickly. Those of you who are Korean, if you speak Korean, you don't have to think. But if you have to speak English, you have to think, and it's slow. For those of you from Uzbek, if you speak, you can speak Russian and different dialects of Uzbek. It's very simple. But learning Korean is very difficult because the connections are weak. And so if you keep practicing, it'll get stronger. So how to use your brain? we say use it or lose it. We have to stimulate our brain through experiences, such as eating different types of food, such as meeting different people, reading articles, engage in activities. And if you repeat this over and over again, as in sports, you become good. So you can act and throw a basketball or kick a football automatically and communicate others with effectively. So in order to be creative, you have to invest at least 10 years of your life in a particular enterprise. And in science, we're taught to be objective. We're taught to be rational. Is this possible? Well, this is questionable because whenever you have information, sensation or information get connected to feeling and emotion. And this is co-development. And sometimes we teach people don't feel. And you have to be objective. You have to be rational. And of course, scientists are trained that way. But this is how you have Nazis, how extremists who do not feel, who cannot empathize. And this is the basis of racism, sexism, and stereotype. They don't see people with emotions, with a sense of connectiveness, but they categorize people as an object without any feeling, without any inner humanity. That's why racism and sexism is very destructive, because it dehumanizes. And we have to learn to connect feelings with the information that is available. So how does a child learn? They're born with 100 billion neuron, and it has to be connected. So it can be through direct experience, like sucking your thumb or walking. But the most important is the relationship around you. Your parents, your brothers and sisters, who provide a stimulating environment. And this is how we understand reality, through our experiences directly or through the relationship. And this is how we develop our mindset. And so, what kind of mindset? So when children are born, they have to learn, and they have to develop, they have to walk, they have to communicate. So children are naturally curious. And when they discover a challenge, like walking, they're very happy. When they learn how to talk, they're excited. And this is how you gain self-confidence. And once you have this positive expectation, you like to engage and you like to challenge. So when you do something interesting, when you're curious and you discover what happens to you, you feel joy and you feel happy. Why? Because your brain rewards you with dopamine and serotonin as a way to overcome challenges in life. And so children are naturally curious, naturally happy, and naturally engaging. But what happens to children as they become adults? We go to school. We are told to sit down. We're told to don't ask questions. We're told to follow the rules. And what happens? Our brains begin to shut down because teachers treat us as an object. And this is the requirement of the course. And this is what you need to do. They do not engage and ask students, what interests you? What are you curious about? So educational system actually destroys our creativity, destroys our curiosity. So we gather a lot of information, but what do we do with this information? And in Korea, because of the entrance exam, we're taught to get the right answer. But why is the answer the right answer? So I asked Korean students, who is the father of music? I asked Japanese students, who is the father of music? I asked German students, who is the father of music? Korean and Japanese students said, Johann Sebastian Bach. Is Bach father of music? He was born 500 years ago. However, what about Chinese music? It existed over 7,000 years. What about Indian music? What about pansori, Korean music? That's not music. So why Johann Sebastian Bach, father of music? Why is that the correct answer? So when I go to Germany or Austria, I ask the same question. People said, that's a stupid question. There is no father of music. No one invented music. Music exists everywhere. And I said, well, the actual correct answer is Johann Sebastian Bach. And he said, why? So Germans, they have never heard this answer before. And the reason is, during the Meiji Restoration period, many people went to Europe and they discovered they're playing the music of Bach. Beethoven, Mozart, the teachers were Bach. He took church music and made it popular in Europe. But what about Korea? What about China? So the answers you believe to be correct, is it correct? Is Darwinian theory correct? Yes, for almost all the species except human beings. It is incorrect because Darwin said we struggle to survive. We compete and we try to have as many offspring as possible. So let's look at Korea. How many babies do we have? Less than 1. How could you have sex and not have babies? Well, we have contraception, condom, birth control. So human beings invented contraception so you can enjoy the pleasure of sex and not have babies. No other animal can do that. So human beings, most advanced society, separated sex from having babies. And Darwin cannot explain creativity, such as controlling fire. Is Newtonian theory correct? Gravity and planetary motion. Yes, for mechanical motion. But Newtonian physics cannot explain electricity. It cannot explain nuclear fission or fusion. That's where Einstein came along, and he claimed E equals mc squared. Energy and mass can be converted. So Newton thought there was potential energy and kinetic energy. And energy and mass are two different things. And it cannot be converted, but with electricity, with nuclear fission, Newton cannot explain this phenomena. So Einstein explained this phenomena with theory of relativity, that light travels and it can bend and they have warp. And his theory has been accepted for the last 100 years. But this Newtonian physics was limited to mechanical world. It cannot explain the nuclear world. But can Einstein explain quantum level physics? And the answer is no. You know why? Because he claimed that God does not play dice with the world. He cannot accept random, chaotic universe because God created the world in a way so we can understand it. So the reason is, if it's chaotic and random, how can we predict it and how can we manage it? And in order to have science, we need to understand it. And he assumed nothing can travel faster than the speed of light because we see through light. If something travels faster than the speed of light, we cannot see it. We cannot study it. And we know that Einstein is wrong. Higgs boson particle, discovered by Professor Higgs, who received the Nobel Prize in Physics, they discovered quantum particles that can travel faster than the speed of light. Yes, Einstein was right in predicting the black hole, and we actually have photos of black hole, but there are particles that is invisible. We cannot see. We can only measure. So Einstein was wrong at the quantum level. So science does not give us the right answer. It gives us an approximation. And Newtonian physics provide us with a better approximation than the Christian worldview, viewing Earth as a center. Einstein's theory of relativity can explain mechanical universe and also nuclear universe, but it cannot explain quantum phenomena. And it is quantum physics that is able to explain. So when we say science is important, it is important to understand the limitations of science and the information that we can provide. And the last science that developed is psychology. We know about the physical world, we know about the biological world, we know about black hole, but do we understand human beings? Do we understand who we are? Do we want how to love one another, care for one another? Do we understand why people are so violent? People are angry. And the answer is not very much. So we are born with a potential, and each person is able to develop the potential, but they have to have a supportive environment. And it is important to look at the communities in which we live in. So it was assumed 100 years ago, Sigmund Freud, Darwin, and psychologists like Terman, who developed IQ tests, our instinct or drive controls behavior, and we're discovering actually it's our cognition, the way we think, and where we feel that controls our behavior, and our behavior leads to outcome, positive or negative, and it influences the way we think and the way we feel. But with neurobiology, we're discovering cognitions, information is connected with emotion. So can you be totally objective? Can you be totally rational? The answer is no, because we're human. We have two qualities. We have the quality to be rational. We have quality to be empathetic. So information has meaning. Information has value. It cannot be totally objective. And this is what we know to be psychology. So our leaders are certain leaders like Steve Jobs, born that way. But the problem is he never graduated from university. He was adopted because the graduate students could not raise him. And he failed more than anyone else in the world. But he invented the smartphone. And Bandura said, it is ironic, the theories that we developed explain the world in a causal way, but we don't understand our own agency. So we cannot control our genes. Can you control your gene? Can you change your culture or environment? We know global warming is destroying the world, but we don't have much capability. So very few things can be done in terms of controlling our genes or environment. What can you control? Your behavior. And this is what is called self-efficacy. In order to control your behavior or performance, you have to have belief that you can succeed. But having belief is not enough. You have to have the skills. Riding a bike, driving a car. You have to have the skills, and it leads to a certain outcome. So I drive right side in Korea, but if I go to Japan, I have to drive left side. And it leads to different outcome. And how can we increase the confidence that we can perform that will lead to positive outcome? So you have to have intention to become an academic, to become an athlete, become a singer. And you have to have goal. You have to have goal setting. And you have to develop skills with the support of people around you. And what is important is success that you achieve, but you achieve that success through the feedback. Feedback from the coach, your teachers, your parents, and your friends who tell you if you're going in the right direction. And more importantly, we need social support. We need information. We need people who really believe in us and who provide material support. And what we discovered in research is having people believe in you, having parents, teacher, or friend, even though you fail, they tell you, I believe in you. If you continue, you'll be successful. So what is the most important aspect of confidence? Of course, it's nice to have knowledge. It's nice to have information. But there are two things that we find consistently in Korea, in the United States, in Germany, all over the world. One, self-regulation. We have to control ourselves. Why? Because we're basically animals. We're basically primitive. Okay? We want to eat, we want to have sex, and we're very violent. And if we allow our basic instincts to emerge, you will act like Donald Trump or a lot of the problematic leaders that you see around the world. They cannot control themselves. Even though he's infected with coronavirus, he's running around having election and trying to convince him that he's doing the right thing. So we have to control, and we have to develop, and we have to regulate ourselves. Secondly, we have to develop the skills that we have. And in life, you will not always succeed, like Steve Jobs or myself. You have to be resilient. You have to overcome difficulties. And you need feedback to make sure that you're going in the right direction. And you need some social support. And this is how we develop our brain. So what is creativity? If you look at chimpanzee, they have tremendous amount of stress. And they have not changed in the last 5 million years. Human beings, we change. We used to live in caves. We developed stone tools. We used to live in huts. But now, we're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about satellites that can control and direct. So it is natural to be in despair, depressed. It's natural to be fearful. It's natural to hate. It's natural to be greedy so you can have all the food and all the resources that you need. It's natural to be suspicious. This is a description of chimpanzees' socialization. Well, the alpha male dominates. So imagine living in a community that's full of despair, fear, hatred, greed, and suspicion. This is our life 80,000 years ago. But how do we change? We develop hope. Hope is a belief things will get better. And you need hope. If you want to get depressed, give up hope. We need to have confidence that we can accomplish our goals, even though we may not have the skill. You have to believe in yourself and have other people believe in you. And you have to be empathetic because there is no one who is perfect. We need support. We need caring and sharing to develop our skill. And we need to share. And it's the ability to share information, share resources, that we have major accomplishments in civilization. And we need to develop trust. So what is the basis of long life, health, and happiness? What is what you see in blue? What is the basis of misery? You see it in red. And hope, confidence, empathy, sharing, and trust is all created. It's a human creation. You do not see it in other species. And in reality, people will say, you should have hope, you should be angry, and you should be competitive. And what kind of society will we create? So this is psychology. This is psychology of hope in creating the future. And so as Peter Drucker, father of modern management, what is the best way to predict the future? Create it. So human beings have to have hope that they create the future. And how do you create it? You have to have goals. What is your goal in life? What do you want to accomplish? And once you have a goal, you have to have a specific target. If you're a student, it could be grade. If you're an athlete, there's certain performance. Then what type of competence or capabilities do you need? You have to understand your capabilities to reach the target to make sure you're going in the right direction. And in order to do that, you have to have self-control. You have to control yourself. You have to control your emotion. You cannot just love the people that you know. You have to learn to trust other people. You have to learn to share with people from other parts of the world because they have information and experiences that you don't have. So the part of globalization is sharing of this information. But part of globalization is also racism and sexism and prejudice and discrimination. That is very destructive. So the question is, do you want to behave like an animal? Or do you want to behave like a human? You need to develop and act like a human. If you want to live long, if you want to be healthy, and if you want to be happy. So we'll stop my lecture here. I haven't finished all the PowerPoint files, but it'll be important and it'll be interesting to get questions from you, and I'll try to answer your questions in order. And even though we're limited, even though we have to speak through internet. So are there any questions? In terms of language development, in our brain, there is a language center that is responsible for language. So if you grew up in Korea And if you learn only Korean, the language center is occupied by Korean, and it becomes a super highway. So other languages cannot go through this area. So if you learn a language after age of 10, it has to go bypass, and it takes a very long time. However, if you grew up in Switzerland before age of 10, where you can use language center to learn 4 or 5 different languages, although it would take longer, but it would use the same language center, okay? And what are we discovering? Those people who can speak many languages. One of the more interesting result is that people who are bilingual are less likely to have brain damage or dementia. The onset of dementia is 4 years later. So what happens to our brain is that our brain, inside our brain, there are no blood cells. Okay? As you know, blood provides oxygen and it takes away waste. So when it's oxygenated, it's red. And when it's waste, it is green. But our brain is compressed with 100 billion cells compact. And there is no blood vessel to take away the waste. So what happens is when you sleep, the brain cell relaxes and gets smaller. And the brain fluid drains to our spinal cord, and all the toxins are taken away. But if you don't sleep, the parts that are blocked becomes problematic, and it begins to decay. So as we get older, certain parts of the brain gets blocked. And if you don't sleep, then you're more likely to have brain damage and dementia. So the recommendation is to sleep at least 8 hours a day so you can clean your brain. In addition, when you sleep, your brain, with all the stimulation, consolidates. It connects. That's why babies, they have to sleep a lot, because it is tremendously stimulating. So they have to sleep so that the brain can stimulate and they can learn. So what happens is when you're born, we have possible connections. And so we are able to make more connections, but certain parts get blocked. So you have to make new friends and you have to learn new things. But as we get older, we try to maintain the same friends, eat the same thing. And when that part gets blocked, what will happen? Then you have brain damage. So as you get older, you have to make more friends. So how do adolescents develop creativity? You cannot develop creativity by reading, testing, and through exam. You develop creativity by interacting with people who are different from you. If you're female, you have to interact with male students. If you're Koreans, some Koreans may hate Japanese. Many of my friends are Japanese. Many of my friends are Chinese, German, Swedish. Initially, it's very difficult to talk to someone from a different culture because there is no brain connection that allows you to speak German. But you have to practice it. And learning grammar, English, is not effective because you don't have the emotional connection. So you have to talk to an American so you know how to communicate emotionally and empathetically. So a lot of high school students learn grammar. I don't know any grammar, and I can speak English. But do you know that I speak English in a different way? I speak German English when I'm in Germany to talk about Bundesliga, Bayern Munich, automotive. If I go to France, I use English to talk about fashion, food, and wine. If I go to Italy, I talk about pasta. Okay? So it's not knowing the language, but what you can talk with your colleague, what you can share, and have wonderful French wine with a steak, have wonderful pasta with basil, to drive a BMW in Autobahn 200 kilometers per hour. If you have these experiences, you can communicate, and you can relate, and you can co-create. But if you don't have the emotional connectivity, and if you don't have the experiences, then it is very hard to be creative. So Korean education actually destroys creativity. And where do we get Korean education from? 국민학교, Vogue School. is from Germany that Japanese scholars brought, and that is the basis of Nazism. The goal is to train people to be soldiers, to be workers, so they will contribute to national development. And it's not for your creativity, it's not for your potential. So you can get into Seoul National University, but do you truly understand mathematics? Do you truly understand how to speak in English? The answer is no. So Germany got rid of its Volksschule, 국민학교. What did we do in Korea? We just changed the name. We call it 초등학교, but the system is the same. Our legal system is from Germany. Our Zaibasu or 재벌 system is from Germany. What we consider to be Western food, 경양식, is from Vienna. And these cultures gave up their past because it's no longer relevant, but we're still holding on to the backward legal system, backward educational system, and backward organizational system. It doesn't fit us, but we don't know what to do. So our system, law, society is Western, and it does not capture our emotions and our relationship. And we have to develop new types of organization. Of course, we developed semiconductors, K-pop, but we haven't changed our educational system. We haven't changed our legal system. And so there is very little trust and a lot of frustration. Why? Because it's a Nazi system. It denies us a sense of humanity. It denies us a chance to participate and create change. And so how do we develop creativity is very difficult because you have to prepare for entrance exam. In order to develop creativity, you have to go to the real world. You have to learn how to code so you can make software, how to make a car by sanding and grinding metal. And it is only through experience we get connection. If you just learn sitting in a class, it will evaporate. It's not real connection. We have to use our hands and we have to use our feet. And that's why German economy is very good, because they make the products and they make the best products in terms of the parts that goes into BMW and Benz. And so Koreans, Confucians, want to be a bureaucrat. But that is separated from reality. We have to deal with reality, and we have to work with people, and we have to work with different people. So when we work, there are two ways of giving feedback. Koreans say, oh, that's terrible. You're a stupid person. You should not do it that way. No, that's a terrible way. It shouldn't be emotional based. Feedbacks is information based. You say, what is your goal? And the way you are studying, for example, if you're studying and if you have your smartphone beside you, you will check every 2 minutes, okay? And you will have ADHD. You cannot concentrate. So good students will leave their phone outside their room. And you give feedback as to, hey, you're not studying properly, you're not paying attention, or you're focusing on the wrong part of the textbook, okay? You're not managing your time. Most people fail to manage their time, especially even executives. So what is equal? We have everyone 24 hours. But how are you managing your time? Are you managing your time effectively? And someone outside can give you information, someone who has succeeded. So how do we grow up and how do we become contributing members of society? One is self-regulation. You have to regulate. But the most important thing, what kind of society do you want to live in? Yes, Korea is wonderful in terms of technology, but there is no trust. And Koreans only take care of their family members, what we call 연고. And so Koreans are not happy. Koreans are very abusive to women. Even though we love our mother, we love our wives, and we love our daughters, we're very abusive to women. And we don't treat them equally. We don't pay them the same salary. So if we don't treat women equally, if we don't treat foreign workers equally, can you be happy? So what is the basis of happiness? Is sharing and caring. It is when you share, when you care, you become happy. Only those people who are confident in themselves can share and care. And it doesn't matter if you're from Indonesia or Uzbek. We have to treat each person as a human being. Listen to them and find out what inspires them. And the answer to how do we create a happy society is to share information. And so in order for Koreans to be happy, we have to be sharing and caring, not only with our family members, but our community, other Koreans, and foreign people who come to Korea. And those people who share and care, as in Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden, they're happy. And they live long. And they're healthy. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you again next week in our regular online course in cultural psychology. And you're welcome to send questions that you have online. So thank you very much.